Yeah, well, welcome everyone to Harvest of Voices, the kickoff for Mountain Harvest Festival. My favorite event in Paonia, so I'm pretty excited. It's really great to look out and see, before it gets too dark, some faces of friends and friendly faces out there. Open hearts and open minds tonight. So we have an exciting program for you. And I want you to feel free to clap enthusiastically, because those of you who are wearing masks, I'm sure those hoots and hollers won't be heard very well. So, none of us really know what's going to happen this winter. And I really think, though, some things are totally predictable, because at the beginning of 2020, I said, if I only had a little more time, I might be able to get my house really organized. And then spring of 21 rolled around, and I realized that time really wasn't the problem at all. So anyway, I'm glad that everyone is here tonight and coming out to enjoy art in the North Fork Valley. I want to thank the Literary Committee for making this happen, and the judges with the hard task of deciding which pieces to choose among 32 people submitting, and some of them with multiple pieces. There was some really excellent writing, and we just couldn't include it all without keeping you here longer than your butts would probably appreciate. So the Literary Committee and the judges are listed on the back of your program, and they are not necessarily all one and the same. And tonight we also have some extra help. We have Julie on the bar, and Sam inside, and Lou over here at the door. And I want to appreciate all of our sponsors particularly, and everyone, all of you who support the Blue Sage. So we are going to be taking this show, or at least most of it, on the road. We're going to Cedar Edge, to the Grand Mesa Arts and Event Center in Cedar Edge on October 20th or 21st. We're not sure yet which one. It's a Wednesday or Thursday evening, so tell your friends over that way. So before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping details. If you go through this gray door over here and turn left, there's the bathrooms, and you'll see the bar as soon as you walk in. And on we also have a full bar, but we also have some hot cider, and you can feel free to add a shot to that if you want. And on the left of the door, you'll see a little pile of blankets and some coats and things. So for those of you who forgot warmth at intermission, if you're thinking, oh my God, I can't stand it, it's getting too cold, go over there and grab one of those things. So please turn off your cell phones at this time and enjoy the show. Okay, so our first reader says she hates writing intros about herself, but she likes to write poetry, and she likes to read it for people to hear. So she's going to do that now. Nina Klaus from Paonia.
Hello. Thank you. I'm not that tall. This poem is called Strange Language. It's a poem on the peculiarities of language and the misuse thereof. So I wrote this poem after hearing a program on the Bliss Code, which was developed by a man who was in a concentration camp, and he noticed that language had been kind of twisted in a way that it made it so you could sound like you're saying one thing when really you meant the other thing. But it's also kind of a take on when you're learning a new language, we have all these different sayings that you can't really understand unless you're a native speaker. So here we go. We take it all in, we take time, we take care, we make time, we make money, we make love. The strange language. Passion is derived from the Latin word meaning suffering, but everyone wants a passionate relationship. And discipline comes from the root word of disciple, which means to learn, but now is synonymous with punishment. I wonder what we're learning through the private prison systems, maybe the true gears and cogs of capitalism, or maybe how easy it is to perpetuate institutional racism. Race, rat race, Human race, where's the finish line and how do we place? But I digress. Do the calves on our legs long to eat the corns on our feet? Do the butterflies in our stomachs feel trapped by our rib cages? Spring fever, cabin fever, all men are created equal. Sugar-coated, bittersweet, can't fly unless you leap. But the sorrows of this world are not distributed equally among all peoples. We park in driveways, we drive in parkways. Hold your head high, hold your tongue, mind your manners, mind your elders, mind over matter. What doesn't matter, you shouldn't mind, and what matters is before us. We're running out of time, we're running out of air, we're running out of energy, running through my mind. How does one make peace? Make bread, make your bed, make yourself. Self-made man, because everybody can, and if you can't, it's your own fault. Take chances, make it big, make mistakes out of mud, sweat, and twigs. Can't believe everything you hear. Can't see everything you believe. Break out, break down, break up, break even, breakfast. Break the bread and feed the masses. Put your money where your mouth is. Find your home where your heart is. Grow your garden, sow your seeds. Make it up, make believe. Privilege is always having food in the cupboards. Privilege is knowing there is daily safety for my son and daughters, that my ethnic group won't land me in a re-education camp. Work will make you free. Concentrate on that. Why do they still call it ethnic cleansing? Why don't they call it ethnic mending? We need ethnic mending. Use the yarn to darn the holes of the world like socks. Darn it all! Take courage, take heart, make change from $1, invest it where you ought to. Mothers and fathers, don't forget your sons and daughters. Families live without nations, nations crumble without families. Get down onto your hands and knees into full body prostrations, protests on the pavements, virtual vacations, compartmentalized society, social isolation. Make America great again! Political polarization, divide and conquer, veni vidi vici. Love thy neighbor. Polar ice caps are melting, wildfires are now a season. Season your vegetables, Roundup ready to get your gut bacteria changed. Raining across the Midwest, plastic particle dust in the wilderness. Take heed, take a breath, take a bath. Take from the rich and give to the poor. Give a party, give a shit. Sometimes it's hard not to give up. I don't have the answers, but while we're here, let us take time to make connections, make beauty, make a life worth living. Let us guide our lives through what we will take with us and what we will leave behind us. Thanks.
Our next reader is a musician, writer, artist, and lover of wild things. She moved to Paonia a little over a year ago and is currently most interested in gathering truth from carrot seeds while advocating for the rights of all life on Mother Earth. Leah B. Really talking to them.
Okay, I'm really gonna talk into the microphone. Kiss it. Thank you. All right. There's a little feedback. Hope it's not too much. Okay. If a beehive could incarnate as a woman, she might emerge from the cosmos between her mother's legs, humming a current of universal peace. She might then, reaching skyward, find the flowers of her mother's chest, and, drinking deeply, she might alchemize that milk into sweet honey that never spoils. Her millions of wings might be seen fluttering in those gentle moments between worlds, when the sky is cobalt blue and twinkling, when the memory of her humanness fades like the old world is crumbling before our very eyes. If a beehive could incarnate as a woman, her purest ecstasy might be deep diving into the sensual cocoons of petal and pollen. She might, as a child, twirl from lotus to lotus, sunflower to sunflower, pausing to collect the ancient web of life on her limbs to bring home to her warm, golden, and vibrating kitchen. She might then, in secret, sprout 1,000 arms to transmute that divine nectar, filling jar after jar with the sweet honey of her alchemy. Her body as woman might glow from the inside out like a cauldron of primordial mysticism, woman, hive, and honey. This beehive incarnate might be seen etching new symbols into old canyon walls, marking this historical time of rebirth. She might be seen smashing microwaves, setting fire to cell towers and smart meters. She might invest in a laser gun to play cowboys and Indians with the machines in the sky. She might even be caught stealing thousands of bottles of Roundup to bury deep into the earth, never to be seen again. Her holy rage might send our entire valley spinning in a humming hive-like whirlwind as she pulls up like weeds the miles and miles of plastic pipe where we've kept the water of life hostage. She might throw those enormous, blue, dusty and dripping PVC pipes into the streets of our beloved town so that no one could forget that to condemn our life-giving water to underground plastic pipes is to condemn our living earth to very hot kindling and flame. Do you remember the forest walk along Stewart Ditch? Well, what remains now that we have so brilliantly piped it underground? What remains is a desert, a hot, dying, and eroding wasteland where the life is disappearing rapidly and permanently. It's hot. Have you ever felt the way a wild sunflower cools the air all around her? Or how the cottonwood, our sacred tree of life, cools, shades, houses, feeds, and nourishes all of the life that comes to her. The water of the earth longs to play with the root tendrils of growing things. And who are we to proclaim privilege over what has been freely given to all, what freely belongs to all of life? And how, in the impossibly apparent interconnectedness of life, have we forgotten that to pipe the ditches is to rob the living earth of her water, and thus our future of life in this valley? In our attempt to manage and conserve the water, we are, maybe in actuality, sucking the earth dry, leaving carcasses and kindling in the trail of our gas-guzzling machines, destroying habitat and depleting the water table. This affects our entire community, whether we choose to see that now or in 50 years, when the same dust of Delta blows through the dust of our once fertile valley. So, I wonder, if a beehive incarnated as a woman today, how might the hum of her eternal promise to heaven and earth resound through this world? How could she affect a world, this world of confusion, where we've imprisoned the water behind metal gates under lock and key, and then sold the rights off to the highest polluter? Where would she gather her nectar? Where would she dance her ancient pollen path? And how could we possibly live without her? Thank you.
Paul Epps lives in Paonia. A teacher no more, he came west to know it. A cat then joined him, who thinks he's a poet.
Might have to, I'll be all right.
fired up as I can get.
Yep, I think I'm going to be okay. Am I okay? And now for something completely different. Ooh, man, I'm blown away by the first two. Little prologue here. We're at the end of a day, and it's another day of getting older, and then we'll have another day of getting older, and the process repeats itself, and we get older, and we get older. And, you know, at some point, we get old. But we don't really know when that's going to happen. I mean, it could be that you're self-identifying, and that makes it a little bit easier, I suppose. Or it could happen like this. You go back to your hometown 4 or 5 years ago, and you visit the library. And on the way out of the library, you encounter a young woman who you know with a child in tow. And you exchange pleasantries, and as you begin going away, you hear the child say to the mother, "Mommy, why did you talk to that old man?" Excuse me? No, that's not right. But there it was. I was an old man in that 5-year-old child's eyes, in his mind. But then again, my 5-year-old mind probably would have come to the same conclusion. Anyway, eventually we get old, and this is what I wrote about, is since I've had that experience once already, I thought I'd write about when I was old. I never thought of myself as old as I was. And I reaffirm my pleasure in the company of small children, that other little kid notwithstanding, and small animals of all sizes. Weather became less of a factor in the goodness of a day. But I did not change my preference for wearing long pants in deference to the sensitivities of the general public when I was old. I wondered if every new ache and pain was going to stay on for the duration. And I realized there were some physical feats that I could no longer accomplish. Running a 10-minute mile, jumping a 4-foot fence, rising from a cross-legged sit without using my hands, dancing all night, and hitting a curveball. But then again, I never did hit a curveball very well, even after I became a switch hitter. The baseball kind, of course. I looked at mirrors more often out of curiosity, while some things began to matter less. Matching socks, television news, ego, mirrors, competition, sex, when I was old. I became more mindful, or at least I hope so, because it sounds like something I might want to be more of. Although I took no comfort in any of the aging process, least of all, more memory loss than cannabis can account for. I thought about how lucky I've been, but became less certain about luck as a concept. Also, I tried not to be so politically biased, but couldn't quite get there when I was old. Objects in the rearview mirror seemed even further away and more difficult to make sense of. Furthermore, strategies needed to be developed and refined for dealing with such issues as nighttime visual acuity, daytime visual acuity, remembering names, and technology, especially phones, since the end of the time of rotary dialing. I became more nostalgic and found that tears came more easily more often for a variety of reasons, not all of them reasonable. Additionally, I found that I was increasingly susceptible to losing my sense of balance, but not my sense of humor when I was old. I tried to ease up on some physical activities like lawn mowing and using ladders and shaving. But most folks couldn't tell that I had slowed down because slow had long been an adjective associated with me when I was old. The fountain of youth was still a myth. Fear was sometimes still a factor. And faith and hope were still good companions. I could go on, but suffice it to say that the mountains spoke more clearly, the trees waved more sincerely, and rivers rivered more dearly when I was old.
Anne Bolter's debut novel, Nina, book 1 of the Viking Treasure Huntress series, topped the Amazon charts as #1 bestseller in the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. The book also received a gold medal in the Reader's Favorite International Book Awards and an Indie Bragg Medallion for Excellence. When she's not tending goats on her Delta farm, she's working on the second novel in the series. Anne?
I'm very excited to be here. A little nervous, but very excited. I self-published my first book on Amazon 3 years ago, almost to the day, and I've been thrilled with how it's been received. The book is first in a series, the Viking Treasure Hunter series, which is centered or based on a very unique, a very special Viking longship, the Treasure Huntress. So tonight I've chosen to read a brief excerpt from the prologue of book 1, which is actually the creation of the ship, so you get an idea of what makes it special. So prepare to go back in time. We're going back to 900 AD, southern coastal Norway, and we are entering into the cabin of the shipbuilder Sigurd and his dying wife Layla, who have agreed to build one last ship for another man, Jarl, and they're having a discussion over the next stage of the ship's creation. After they finished eating and he had cleared away their dishes, Sigurd showed her his crude sketch of a dragon's head and neck. The skeleton frame of the ship was complete, and he was preparing to start on the bow. "What do you think?" he asked. "It's nice, but what? You have made similar before." "Yes," he said as he glanced back at his scribble, his brow furrowed as he tried to identify what she didn't like about it. "This one needs to be different," she challenged. "Special." "I could use another animal, I suppose, but which would be better than a dragon?" "Why not all of them?" He looked at her blankly, and Layla was sure he must be thinking she had lost her mind. "I have given this a lot of thought, so hear me out before you speak. Why not use the dragon's head, but give it scales on its neck, each the size of a man's hand? On each scale you can carve the symbol of another animal. Then the ship can possess and draw from the power of all rather than just one." "That would take meticulous carving," he said, frowning, but she could tell he was excited by the idea. "It would, and you can do it." Bear, bull, horse, he started to list under his breath. "Fish, gull, ram," she added. "I can sketch them for you. Not the whole beast, only a symbol of their greatest strength, their essence, if you will, like this." She picked up the coal and began to sketch an eagle's head and beak, curved to fit in the shape of a dragon's scale, then a porcupine's spiny back, a panther's paw print. She looked up at him, and he nodded. "And the dragon's head? I suppose you have an idea for that as well?" he asked. She smiled and nodded before pulling a completed sketch from the middle of the stack of blank parchments. Sigurd whistled between his teeth. Her eyes searched his face. "What are your honest thoughts?" she asked. "Honestly, I think you overestimate my skill as a carver." "I do not. It is stunning and beautiful, but, well, the detail is too fine. It would not hold up to what a ship must. Storms, battles. I thought of that too. What if it was made from ironwood?" "Ironwood?" "Only the head. That's impossible. It would be hard enough to carve this detail from a softwood, but ironwood? Impossible, he repeated. Not impossible, she disagreed. Difficult, yes, but not impossible. And if it could be done, would it hold up? Aye, he said, nodding and frowning at the same time. If it could be done, it will probably outlast the rest of the ship. She smiled and nodded. Good. I didn't say I would do it, he protested. There are other concerns. Like the color of the wood would not match for one, he stammered, struggling to come up with something. He noticed her smug expression. But I see you have thought of that as well. I had thought to save that for another day. I knew you would be concerned about the carving and thought it might be best not to overwhelm you. Spill it, woman. What else do you have planned for my ship? Our ship, Layla corrected him before continuing. You and I have accumulated much gold over the years, have we not? We have no children left to leave it to, and have more than we can spend. Certainly more than I will ever spend, and even if your next wife enjoys silks and jewels, there should be plenty to accommodate her. Do not say such things, even in jest. You know there will never be another woman for me, so yes, we have plenty of gold. Could some of it be melted down and somehow wiped or dipped on the head and scales? I'm envisioning it thicker on the head to make it appear as if it were made from solid gold, then becoming less and less down the neck and the scales until it melds into the natural golden color of the wood at the bottom. Now we have a seam break, and they actually go to the valley where the ship is being built. Sigurd held her up to show her the latest scale he had completed, a raven's eye. Layla nodded. It is good. It will give the ship the protection of raven's sight. That leaves only one, he said. Will you show me your idea now? She nodded again. I have the last sketch back at my furs. Can you guess it? She asked as he carried her back up the hill. I'll give you a hint. It is the most cunning, powerful animal of all. Surely we have not missed such an animal with such power, he said. And you say the most powerful? More powerful than the dragon? He could see she was enjoying stumping him, so he continued to guess long past when he had tired of the game. Do you give up? She finally asked. Aye, he smiled. It is man. He frowned as he gently positioned her back on her nest of furs. But men will be on the boat. What have you drawn? A sword, a shield, a battle axe? He reached for the sheaf of paper, but she pulled it tight against her breast. What is the most important power the gods have bestowed upon man? He shook his head as she handed him her last sketch. He balked. This? It is love. More powerful than a man's battle axe, more powerful than his sword or shield, more powerful than even his mind. It is so powerful it can make him do things his mind tells him are impossible or foolish. It can give him resolve or courage when he has none. It is his greatest strength, and it's the true essence of man, like the raven's eye or the crab's claw or the scallop's shell. We have added all the great animal powers to make the ship stealthy, fleet, and strong, in order to protect her and make her invincible in battle. We have ensured all of those things. Now we must ensure that this ship is blessed not only to find the physical riches that our captain seeks, but also to make sure he finds the greatest treasure of all. I'm not sure what Jarl will have to say about it, Sigurd frowned. If you do not think he will want it or is ready for it, then don't tell him. Sigurd glanced back at the sketch of the two figures entwined in a loving embrace. No details, easy to carve, but so clear, as were all of her drawings. I will do it. And if Jarl notices and complains, then tell him you are only honoring the fancy of a dying woman. He seems very serious, driven. I don't think he would understand or appreciate the truth. It will be our secret. And Sigurd, I have one last request, if you agree. We did not build this ship for coin. Jarl has paid enough already with his deposit to more than cover any costs. Do not accept the remainder of what is owed. Instead, tell him when he no longer feels the drive to seek riches, he must give the ship to someone else, someone worthy. No coin or favor is ever to change hands for her. He must swear to that and agree to make subsequent captains swear to it as well. That way she will always end up in the hands of someone deserving. I like that, Sigurd agreed. He paused. And I finally thought of a name for her, he said quietly. What do you think of the treasure huntress? Layla smiled and nodded. It is a good name. May she provide her captain with all of the physical riches he desires until she is able to seek out the true desire of his heart.
Anna Mettler.
Dandelion. When I come back, let me be a dandelion, a sun in a field of suns. Roast my roots and eat my greens, taste the bitter of my milk. Rip my hollow stem and watch it furl and spiral like a snail. But in the end, when my hair is a sphere of stars and I am moon woman, I wish for a child to come and pick me and hold me in her hand. Let her be the one to send me off, carried by her playful breath.
Born and raised in Illinois, Joseph Colwell earned a BS in Wildlife Management from the University of Idaho and a master's in Forest Economics from Michigan State University, then spent almost 30 years with the U.S. Forest Service in 4 western states. He and his artist wife, Catherine, now own the Cedars Retreat northwest of Hotchkiss, where he has written and published 6 nature-related books, both fiction and nonfiction. Joseph?
I'm another old man, but I'm going to talk about an old tree. Standing in the wild, I slowly picked my way down the rocky slope, stepping over lichen-covered basalt and sandstone rocks, prickly pear cactus, and fallen dead junipers. I considered this hillside my old-growth forest since there were few young trees. It was an art gallery of ancient, twisted, and gnarled old giants. Now, the term giant, meaning not in height, since most were less than 20 feet tall, but in girth and heavy limbs. I felt the long passing of time among the trees, the rocks, the far-off mountains, and the valley below. I sat down beside one Methuselah and rested my back against the trunk. I estimated the age at probably 400 to 500 years. Calling it a tree did not do it justice. It was a stately living thing with more wisdom and history than I would ever have. I thought about what it was as well as what I was. It was not mobile and didn't look like animals I am familiar with, but it was alive. It had wood instead of bones, leaves instead of lungs that breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen, bark that carried food and water to all parts of the body, sap instead of blood. Its brain was somehow scattered throughout the body, but I knew something coordinated all its living functions. It knew its place in this world and stood silent except for the quiet rhythmic melody of wind whistling through green needles and dead twigs. Half of the tree was bare of needles, long dead, but still part of the body. As I sat there, breathing in its exhalation of oxygen and giving it my carbon dioxide, I thought of my place in this world. I had explored many places, lived many adventures, learned many facts of life, but I still searched for a meaning of place. I loved this hillside, the rocks, the trees, the birds, the sky, the chipmunks, and the deer nibbling the greenery. I considered it a small wilderness, but did I belong in such a wilderness? I remembered wise words from Thoreau in Wildness is Preservation of the World, and Muir's advice to climb the mountains and get their good tidings. But here, Muir's other words hit home. I never saw a discontented tree. They grip the ground as though they liked it, and though fast-rooted, they travel about as far as we do. I wanted to talk to this living being, but I didn't know its language. I wanted to ask what it had seen in its life. It was obviously here before Europeans settled and started changing their world. It lived with a Ute, who may have sat at the base of this tree too. But what would they have seen? Were there many tree neighbors? Did wolves and grizzly roam the valley below? How far could it see? I wondered as I squinted to see the distant mountains looming vaguely in the smoky haze of summer. The world had changed around this ancient tree, but it continued to stand rooted in the rocky soil and its own unmoving world not changing. Or did it? I loved the solitude that I found here, but I was a visitor. I moved around, constantly asking questions and looking for answers. Each answer created a new question. Too much diversity? The tree reveled in its own diversity, but it was limited. How many birds had sat in its branches, nested in its needles? When it was young, deer may have nibbled on tender young branches. A coyote may have burrowed at its base. An owl could have nested high up on that large fork of a branch, now dead and bare. I sat on the rocky ground talking to the tree, asking questions. Maybe the owl and coyote did as well. Maybe coyote language resembles tree language. I did understand the language of the wind. It told me to stand firm, find my place, listen to the silence. It said to look for the relationship of all things and respect differences. We all need to live together. We will find our place. We need the wild places, but they do not need us. As I stood to go, I ran my hand over the rough bark and the main trunk. I caressed the time-worn smoothness of the dead limbs. I think I heard a voice. Or maybe it was the wind. It said to find my place, then treat it and all around me with respect. The wildness is in our minds as well as the mountains.
Born in Delta, Colorado, Caleb Fergenchik is a river guide, nonprofit consultant, community organizer, and speech and debate coach in Grand Junction. He organizes and hosts Slamming Bricks, the state's largest LGBTQ slam poetry competition in honor of the 1969 Stonewall riots. Caleb?
Hi all, thanks for having me. I just want to make a quick recognition, something that Joseph alluded to, which is that we are on Ute land. So if you like what I read tonight, I super encourage you to make a donation to the Southern Ute Reservation. If you don't like what I read tonight, make a larger donation. So yeah, I live in Grand Junction, Colorado right now, grew up in Delta, and I don't come back to the county a lot because it was not the kindest county to a young gay boy. So I just want to thank all of you for being here in this space tonight as I kind of rewrite that narrative. And on the subject of rewriting narratives, this is a poem about generational trauma. I have been spending a lot of time with the word unravel. I like the way that my tongue tosses the syllables, holds the spool tight on the roof of my mouth, flicks them into the universe off of my bottom lip. My great-grandfather, Gilpin Red, was Colorado's middleweight champion. He made a name for himself, giving folks a mean bottom lip. Carried the shotgun suicide of his father in his fists. I think that I carry it too, at least when I'm opening a can of tomatoes. Big hands run in the family, red-stained family heirlooms. I reckon that it was my grandpa's secret to peaches and my father's excuse for his hands on me. A great-granduncle that killed women, a granduncle that killed childhood. Abuse is just entropy in perpetual motion, too many stars collapsing under the weight of their own gravity, the remnants of a big bang like the one in Canyon City Cemetery. In 100 billion years from now, every one of them will blink out. In my lifetime, it is predicted that heirloom tomatoes will go extinct. And Gilpin's red gloves are still on display, fraying and begging to unravel. I'm still learning who I am, how to make amends with time, still learning how to love these hands, knowing they will end with me. Thanks.
Okay, our last reader before intermission says she's thrilled to be living in Paonia after a 5-year hiatus in North Carolina, where she learned that there's no place like home. Sharing her writing at events like this is one of her favorite things to do. Carol Kutkowski.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully this is a little comic relief. Had some heavy stuff. Trying to find a place I can see it. Among the many curses and blessings of COVID is something I call memoir mania. Perhaps it was the slowing down of life in general, or the introspection that comes with cocooning, or the scent of fear as we watch the death tolls shoot up. In March, the Wall Street Journal reported that memoir writing had reached epidemic proportions. And membership in the National Association of Memoir Writers was at an all-time high. They even offered a tongue-in-cheek prediction that a side effect of the COVID vaccine could be suppression of the memoir bug. Naturally, contemplating our own early demise could trigger a desire to leave some record of one's life behind, even if only a funny story or two. It's not easy telling people you want to write a memoir. The usual response is something like, huh. Some people aren't even sure what a memoir is. You mean like a biography? When I told my good friend I wanted to write my memoir, her response was, personally, I can't really see being interested in a memoir of someone who isn't famous. Okay, I thought, cross her off the list of guaranteed customers. My family's response was nothing short of terror. What are you going to write about? Am I in it? Are you going to publish it? I had to make the rounds assuring them that I was not writing a scathing tell-all expose of our family. But by far the most common question was simply, why? I have yet to find an answer. It stumps me the way it would if you told someone you wanted to have a baby and their first question was, why? In a way, I've been writing memoirs my whole life, if you include the 30 or so journals I have strewn around my house. So I already have quite a bit of practice crafting a story out of personal experience. Many people who want to write a memoir have never tried, and I've never written one for someone else. But recently, I found myself wondering if I could serve as sort of a surrogate memoirist for my friends and family. So it was that I decided to write this story. Told to me by my 82-year-old ex-mother-in-law, who I like to call my mother outlaw. At 4 foot 11 inches tall and weighing 85 pounds on a good day, she's a spunky pistol of a woman who never misses a chance to pull your leg. The kind of woman who will lean over to a stranger in the grocery line and with a worried look whisper, "Did you know you have a few holes in your pants?" When they look down in surprise, she nods in all seriousness, "Yeah, there's a pretty big one at the top and a few down by your feet." I was recently chatting on the phone with Besta, which is short for grandmother in Danish, when she recounted this story to me.
It was August 1967, a sweltering hot day in Atlantic, Iowa, where the summertime humidity feels like something you have to swim through. She was 29 years old and 9 months pregnant with her third child. On this morning, she was preparing for her last doctor's visit before her scheduled cesarean. Padding around the living room in her sleeveless cotton muumuu, her 15-month-old son at her feet, she realized she had no clean underwear. In those days, more so it seems than now, it was critical that one wear clean underwear. At all times, in case of a car accident, of course, but especially to the doctor's office. So she took her oversized polyester maternity briefs, washed them in the sink, and set them up to dry as quickly as possible. Not long after, her friend Carolyn called. As they chatted away, she began to smell something burning. Anxiety rising in her voice, she said to Carolyn, "I smell smoke, that awful chemical smell. Oh my gosh, I think there could be an electrical fire in the house." In a moment of confusion, she blames on the heat. She obeyed her friend's orders to call the fire department immediately. The fire station in the small town of Atlantic took only moments to respond, but it was long enough for her sister to hear the news on the car radio, fire at 711 Cedar Street, and screech into a U-turn. When the fire trucks arrived, her 9-year-old daughter, who was across the street on the school playground, ran in a panic to the chain-link fence, and her neighbors quickly gathered on the sidewalk. As the concerned onlookers whispered their predictions, the firemen clambered in the house en masse and began searching for an electrical fire. There was no obvious source, but that acrid, slightly sweet, burning chemical smell was unmistakable. They searched upstairs, they searched downstairs, and were scouring the basement when Besta, standing beside the fire chief in her kitchen, had a moment of clarity. Her eyes got big and she inhaled sharply. Then she motioned for the 6-foot-tall man to lean down to hear her. She whispered in his ear, "So you see, I had a doctor's appointment and my dryer wasn't hooked up yet. So I was just," she stepped toward the oven and slowly opened the door. There, spread carefully across the middle rack, were her oversized polyester maternity briefs, set up to dry as quickly as possible. Tiny wisps of smoke were curling away from the browned edges. Apparently, even the lowest setting on the oven was enough to melt the elastic sewn into the legs and waistband. Neither one said a word as she closed the oven, turned off the heat, and the chief went downstairs to gather his men. The next thing she heard was an eruption of laughter big enough to shake the house and confuse the crowd. Young Besta never lived that one down, and the event was recorded in the fire station logbook as "Hot Pants at 711 Cedar Street." Perhaps that's the lasting value of such experiences. Even now, 54 years later, she can recall it with perfect clarity. While she loves to tell this tale, once she's gone, even if the story is repeated, the telling won't be the same. When she told it to me, she prefaced it with, "I should really write this down someday." And so after we talked, I sat down and did just that. I shared it with her and she was tickled pink, making me promise to snail mail a copy to her. So while my friend was right, memoirs of famous people will sell more copies, I think it's the stories of people you know and love that are really worth recording.
So, Kate Redmond lives in Paonia. She's a writer who has always written. She calls it her mooring, her touchstone, and her joy. Kate?
Thank you. Thank you to the Blue Sage and the Literary Committee and to all of you for coming. This is one in a series of stories that I decided to write about my growing up on a ranch. They're short, they're fun, and they're true. This is called Skunks Throw Straight. Tony was a new kid and nothing but trouble. He moved from Sioux City to our Sleepy Valley where everyone knew everyone. And we all had horses. I found him suspicious and exciting. I didn't want to be his friend, but was curious about his skill set. Hot wiring cars, jimmying odometers, making explosives. At 12 years of age, I could already keep jerky boys at arm's length while still mining all they could show me. We were poor, and I was pretty sure that if I invited him home, he would steal one of my many knives that I had won in a bet, in a fight, or traded for. Tony was on my mind as I stepped into country dusk to go burn the trash. We had no such thing as trash pickup. I heard a clanging under our 66 Chevy Impala, and I just knew it was Tony stripping parts. Right away, I thought of going to grab my dad's gun. Instead, I hollered, "You son of a bitch! Hey, get out of there, hey!" Out waddled the big fat skunk. A mason jar stuck on her head. I felt no guilt thinking that about Tony. I whimpered and danced, "Oh no, oh no, oh no," dance, my mind racing on how I could save this animal for which I had a soft spot, unlike my dog. A couple years earlier, I had purged all my childish stuffed animals except for Henry, the bright green bear, and Flower, my fluffy skunk. Today was my day to be heroic and save a real-life flower. I ran, crouched, arms outstretched, put both hands on the jar and gave it a firm, steady pull. The skunk dug her long toenails into the dusty gravel, giving me a counterpull. The jar stayed put, not budging. Fearing she would spray me, I ran backwards and recalled my dad telling me skunks threw their tails straight over their heads with the strong-smelling repellent in a direct, narrow line. I rehearsed diving to the side if it came to that, where she thought I was a threat. I had to try again to free her. I crept back, slower and more gingerly this time. I again put my hand on the jar, but this time I put my other hand on her shoulder. Her fur was not fluffy like Flower, but bristly. I pulled and pulled. I tried twisting the jar slightly, pulling up, pulling down. She let me. Nothing worked. I thought of going into the house to get some lard to lubricate her neck. But if I told my dad a skunk had a jar stuck on its head, he would just come out and shoot it. Time was getting short. She was losing oxygen, showing panic and stumbling. I ran to our grease-laden garage across the driveway, wide enough for haying equipment, and grabbed a ball-peen hammer. This was risky. I could accidentally hurt her by hitting too hard, or the broken glass could cut her. Or once I broke the jar, I felt pretty certain she would spray me. I again approached her and murmured some assurance to us both for the best outcome. Swinging the hammer lightly, but sure enough for one well-landed hit, the jar broke, but didn't shatter. The hammer ball did not proceed to her skull, my biggest fear. I leapt sharply to the side and watched. She livened up, threw her head in the air and skittered in inchoate circles. She sneezed and looked at me. I looked back from 6 feet away. As she turned to fade into darkness, I saw with horror that the mouth, the ring of the jar, was still intact around her neck. For years to come, it stayed there, as she, each spring, would come to parade her kits in front of me.
Michael Cooper is a musical theater writer and composer from New York City who traveled to Paonia to visit some of his friends in July and was only supposed to stay for 2 weeks. He's still here. Michael?
I need to tell you about the old woman at the health food store. She takes up the narrow aisle with her shopping cart and multiple bags and purses. why do some women need to carry multiple bags and purses? She stops to chat with the handsome but weary Indian grocery clerk, arranging pears and kiwis in the damp, cold, refrigerated display section. She's complaining that by refrigerating the pears, they lose their luster, their perfume. He nods and listens attentively while she tries to plead her case for not refrigerating the fruit. Then he argues that if the produce isn't kept cold and if it doesn't sell, and a lot of it never sells anyway, it will just rot and need to be thrown in the garbage. The old woman purses her lips and scrunches her face like a prune and shakes her head passionately, insisting that it's such a damn shame that these luscious pears are being so unfairly treated and that organic produce and we as consumers deserve so much better. The Indian guy and I meet eyes as I reach over for a lemon, and I smile, acknowledging the plight of the pears, and that he's just doing his job and that this old lady is being impractical and overly romantic. And yet, now, several days later, I'm still thinking about how sweet a pear smells when it's perfectly ripe versus that waxy refrigerated scent of cold fruit. And a lot of it never sells anyway.
At Harvest of Voices 2 years ago, Laura Lee Yates read the opening scene from her trilogy in progress, The Odyssey of Emer McNeill. The scene she is about to read takes place near the end of that first book. The second installment is nearly complete, but poor Emer has been in labor all summer. Laura Lee?
So I do have a mouth. So it's the year 1583, and 17-year-old half-Scots, half-Irish Emer McNeill has a rare gift. She can hear the hearts of horses. Now she's been stolen off an Irish beach by Barbary pirates, followers of Allah, who've transported her by galley south and then east, far into the Mediterranean. As a foreigner with white skin and light eyes, Emer is a novelty in the slave market of Algiers. Allerlandia, someone shouted, and other voices chimed in, hounds on the trail. The bandy-legged auctioneer pointed a stubby finger at me. You stand tall, the Frenchwoman Isabeau ordered. Don't give them the pleasure of seeing your fear and never your anger. Blessed Mary will guard you. She crossed herself and smiled. The crowd buzzed with excitement with cries of Farange and Kafir and many echoes of Allerlandia. My knees quivered as Bandy Legs reached a hand toward me, but I didn't flinch when he snatched away my plaid to grasp the thin wool of my caftan. With a vicious stroke of his dagger, he split the garment. All movement ceased for an instant. An unspeakable intimacy. Bandy Legs' breath was hot. He chortled, "Coke Bayaz," and flung back the wool, so it slid off my shoulders and crumpled at my feet. I missed a page. I was going to say, that's not going to make any sense to you either. I am so sorry. This is what happens when you fiddle with your pages. Sound roared, a deafening blur. Turbaned men surrounded me on the flagstones, male stink of fog as they devoured my flesh with their eyes. For a moment, I saw them dancing widdershins as in my childhood nightmares, felt my skin begin to scorch and shrivel. But if I groveled, would they offer mercy? No, the pack would simply move in for the kill. Though my hands ached to cover me, I clasped them to my sides, determined to face the future with the fortitude of my Scottish ancestors on Barra, like the bold Irish O'Flahertys of the Western Shore. She arrived without warning, the crowd about me breaking under a gale of burnished brown, mane and tail streaming silver. If not for the noise in the arena, we'd have heard squeals from shoppers, hoofbeats clattering on stone. But now I heard only her heart, too frenzied for me to comprehend it all, a searing wind that burned away reason to simple instinct, so that I leapt for the leather lead dangling from the halter, brought her to a stop, and began crooning to calm her fiery spirit. "Easy, lass," I murmured, stroking the velvet of her neck, breathing calm into the flared nostrils. "'Tis bonny you are, and safe here with me." 'Twas nonsense, but she believed me, accepting a moment's respite, two together till fate intervened once more. A familiar weight settled upon my shoulders, and I tilted my head enough to see the Frenchwoman Isabeau darting back after covering my nakedness with the plaid mantle. The din intensified, the predators frustrated, the filly rearing high to pummel the air in rage. I waited till her temper spent itself, and she stood shuddering. This time I'd no reassuring words for either of us. Mayhap I should have let her gallop on till she was far away from this horrific place. Through the clamor rang a powerful voice, to a surely accustomed to command, as if my uncle, the McNeil, had traveled to Algiers and learned the Arabic tongue. When the speaker emerged from the marketplace, dressed in indigo robes, he was neither tall nor brawny like Barra's clan leader, yet still he dominated the scene. At the sight of the filly, his fierce visage transformed. Never had I seen a smile change the face so much, sunlight flashing through storm. Then Bandy Leg lunged to grab my shoulder, causing the filly to snort, and her master, for he could be nothing else, to snap a phrase that made the auctioneer jerk back, babbling an apology. 'Twas satisfying to watch Bandy Leg squirm. The newcomer turned to me and spoke a single word that sounded like shukran. In any tongue, gratitude communicated its message, and I nodded, murmuring, "You are most welcome." We smiled at each other, his teeth white against dark mustache and beard trimmed close. My dad, my brothers, all had fine blue eyes, but these were more striking against honey-colored skin. The man in indigo left the filly in my care to converse with the auctioneer, dangling an embroidered bag before Bandy Leg's nose. Hope thundered in my chest. With an obsequious smirk, the auctioneer addressed the crowd, bellowing a grand speech about Otherlandia. When the filly's master beckoned me to follow, I snatched up the ruined caftan, and with the filly prancing on her lead, we exited the Badistan of Algiers. And though it still rankled to be sold as chattel, I thank the goddess and all the saints that I'd found myself among those who valued horses, delivered from utter degradation. Thanks.
The story you are about to hear is true, except for the part that hasn't happened yet. And perhaps it even won't. Lindy Marinas of Paonia and Redlands Mesa.
I love how a lot of the stuff that we're doing is a bit of thread of similarity. And I really love that there's a moon here, because I've called this 2000, it's called 2000 Moons. But 2000 moons have darkened and bright rounded since this vast mountainous watershed abounded with only wild gravity of snowmelt downward. When the Ute land was opened for settlement and closed to those who were already settled in, the North Forked Tongue dug canals and ditches, Shovels, hands, backs, boys, men, trenches. A direct deposit to designated homesteads, that the grass may always be greener. Oh, those canals that sport such life these past 70 years. I've heard a large splash, but I missed the descent, and so it was not clear who the diver was. I suspected a muskrat. Deer. Oh, dear. Hooves of accompaniment with the deer as we all stop and stare, then move on, organically. I've walked those paths for years, for miles, for pairs of shoes, for love of dog, for love of God, the sunset, solitude, scenery, the song, the silence, the sunrise. We said goodbye to the Stewart Mesa Ditch West without knowing it was the last time. Walking my granddaughter home along the vibrant meandering, the milkweed pods were bursting. We marveled with gratitude as each fluffy airborne seed on the autumn breeze floated towards its roots into the next lifetime. The sun was low, and we waved to our shadows on the mirrored glisten of the low tide autumn ditch. I took a photo of us waving. Goodbye, it turns out, because then came the fossil fuel fed yellow metal gougers and diggers and pushers and shovelers with beepers in the name of conservation and salinity control. Paul is getting paid, but what about Peter? Another reclaiming. And so, these late summer days of waning irrigation, I walk Stewart Mesa Ditch east often, knowing when the water is gone, the big blue pipes will be laid out. So, goodbye to gumweed, milkweed, tumbleweed, saltbrush, and sage. Goodbye to the scrub oak and willows as history turns a page. Tumbling all into brown mounds of tangled greenery, I cry for the chokecherry, serviceberry, and elder scenery. The primrose and aster, the chicory and fireweed. Oh, sweet pea, oh, honeybee, oh, how I shall miss thee. Wild roses not yet hip to their imminent blue pipe domain. Naught but a wide swath of leveled brown dust will remain. Goodbye to wild apricots, wild lilacs and plums. Goodbye, Russian olives, asparagus, and great heron. And lettuce. Not forget the wild lettuce. Not forget the wild lettuce. Not forget the wild. Thank you.
I get so mesmerized by these stories that I forget I have to get back up again. All right, up next is Madison Gill, a poet from Montrose who received her degree in English from CSU Pueblo. Her work has been published online and in various publications around Colorado. Madison?
Hi, I'm Madison Gill, and this is a poem I wrote called Glenwood Canyon Speaks. How many centuries did I stand, immaculate, impregnable, before they came with their dynamite, their pickaxes, their dozers, their steel, hell-bent on bending the forces of nature to their will in the name of strange gods, commerce, industry, economy, to rearrange my organs, my spine replaced by a foreign river of tar, my skin crawling with their machinery insects, my painted cheeks stained black with their smog breath. I shake loose in protest, crumble into myself. They never learn. Now, as the wildfire sunset smolders like an unheeded omen, monsoon season on my side, a serendipitous alibi, I summon my full wrath, mud thundering down the mountain. Watch the splinters of their almighty infrastructure swirl in the Colorado's whitewater inferno. Their truck engines sputtering beneath my tonnage as they cart away my aftermath. Oh, what more will it take to make them accept they are forsaken, and at last let me rest?
And last up for the evening, we have Diane Salvain, who has lived in Paonia for much longer than she or anyone else ever thought she would live anywhere. Until the extradition treaty kicks in, she plans to stay, working as copy editor for High Country News, editing and writing for the local Catholic Church's bulletin, and thinking guiltily about all the artwork she is not doing in her spare In her spare time, she reads, walks, and cultivates bindweed and burdock at her tumble-down century-old midden heap of a house. Diane?
Well, I gather people are probably already starting to feel nostalgic about warmer days. This will probably remind you why we're all basically really, really glad that it's fall. It's called Too Darn Hot, although the working title had a different modifier. Summer afternoon, the two most beautiful words in the English language. Either Edith Wharton or Henry James or somebody else said something like that at some point. But whoever it was, I can tell you, it wasn't me. Not this year, anyhow, and probably not last year either. This year, I agreed wholeheartedly with Cole Porter. It's too darn hot. Although I used a much stronger modifier and most definitely lacked the energy to tap dance high-heeled around a lavish living room like Ann Miller in Kiss Me Kate. So don't expect too much from this end of summer essay. Back at the end of July, when I started rummaging my mental shelves, looking for something worth harvesting for Harvest of Voices, something funny or insightful or poetic or at least mildly entertaining, I discovered, much to my horror, that there was nothing there. My brain's interior resembled a picnic cooler long after the picnic. When the ice has melted and there's nothing left but a few limp straggles of lettuce floating serenely in dirty meltwater, accompanied by a few indifferent dead bugs. There was nothing in the intellectual pantry but a stack of stale puns and some snarky political commentary that had long since passed its sell-by date. I've done my best to restock the shelves, but the customer service representative for the Sense of Humor department curtly informed me that at least one of the items in question, humor, was still on back order and has been since 2016 with no shipment date in sight. Okay, I thought, so maybe I have nothing worthwhile to say, but at least I won't waste my time and yours by whinging on and on about the weather. Unfortunately, I lack the necessary strength of character to keep that promise. It's just been too darn hot to keep promises or do anything else for that matter. My friends stagger around like unpaid extras in a grade B zombie movie. And nobody even blinks when a UPS truck sinks into melting asphalt like a mastodon swallowed up whole by the La Brea tar pits. If you step out of an air-conditioned building, the heat flattens you like a bank safe falling out from a window onto a Warner Brothers cartoon. And if you linger too long on an unshaded sidewalk, the soles of your chacos start sizzling like tortillas forgotten on the grill, only with a much less appetizing smell. There was even a point, admittedly a very brief one, when Paonians were almost too hot and tired to argue about politics and masks and vaccines. And I don't even want to get into the wildfire smoke, mainly because it's no longer necessary since all that smoke has already gotten into me. There are many, many things I hate about the new climate we've created, but perhaps the one that hurts the most is the way that it's robbed me of something I took for granted. My delight in all 4 seasons, in living in a place with 4 perfectly attired and distinctive times of year, as clear and crisply bright as a children's picture book. Heaven knows you've all heard me rhapsodize enough over the years about the glory of the 4 seasons, exactly like Vivaldi, only without any perceptible musical ability, which I guess means not like Vivaldi at all. Still, how could you ever tire of the music of time as orchestrated by the planet itself? A symphony of color and change, from the piccolo pacing of the first spring flowers to the snowy adagio of a soft December night. So it was utterly heartbreaking to realize a few years ago that by April I was already dreading June. It was like rolling over in bed one morning to discover with a shock of horror that you no longer loved the man of your heart, that the dearest desire of all your shared days meant nothing to you at all, had become a total stranger. Worse than that, had turned into a giant cockroach, a la Gregor Samsa, a gigantic, steaming, sweaty, stinking, smoldering cockroach at that, who was already scorching the curtains and mucking up the air. Call my lawyers now, I shrieked. I am done with summer. And tragically, the divorce seemed bitter and final. Until, all on a suddenly, it wasn't. A miracle happened. Out of the blue, or rather out of the intolerable, unreflective, smoke-smothered, burnt yellow haze, it finally rained. It did more than rain, it poured, as if the biblical dome of the heavens had been shattered by a well-aimed cinder block, and all the water that had been hoarded unused was impulsively dumped at once in a lingering, luscious, puddle-stomping, frog-dancing, cloud-banging whomper of a rainstorm. At times, the rain hit the pavement so hard that it fell upward, while dinosaur winds tromped across the sky, and thunder rumbled and farted ostentatiously. Like King Kong after an ill-advised binge at Taco Bell. Oh, God in heaven, the wonder and the glory and the sweet, sweet, sweetness of Colorado summertime rain. This is how you know you're truly a Westerner. When it rains, we don't cover our heads and swear and dash for shelter. Instead, if we're inside, we scurry outside, splooshing about in puddles in crazy delight like Gene Kelly on mushrooms. Dodging lightning bolts and too happy to care. The joy is reflected in every face you see. You can actually hear the earth make greedy gulping sounds, sloppily slurping down the water as if it's never seen water before, which really has been pretty much true for a very long time. And afterward, that incredible smell. A sky washed clean and clear of smoke and heat, as suddenly brilliantly blue as the hem of Mary's garment. Every leaf made new and sparkling, intoxicating chlorophyll surging through its veins like God's own homemade wine. And just like that, I fell in love again. Summer at the end of August regained its magic. In the late afternoon, right now, as I write this, the colors are so rich and deep that the world seems drenched in honey. Big trees shiver and twinkle above in a living mosaic of leaf shadows and sky. A hissing sprinkler comes on almost shyly, scattering silver cold diamonds all over the astonishingly green grass. And all at once, I'm 9 again, and summer vacation is not over yet. How could anyone have ever imagined that I didn't like summer? For the magic will deepen as the day goes down, and the coolness gathers like water in the shadows that swim out slowly from beneath the mysterious trees. The night will soon roll in, and the stars emerge politely, one by one from the blue velvet deep. Maybe later on I'll go outside to look at them, because now that we're more than halfway through August, I can afford to be nostalgic, to forget, at least for the moment, everything but the intrinsic, inviolable, incomprehensible beauty of the cosmos. The clicketing clickets have built so solid a wall of sound that I can almost rest my head against it. But instead, I'll stretch out so I can wriggle my toes in the green happy grass. And soon I will be wishing on the first falling star. And yes, I might wish for just a little more summer, though perhaps with a bit more rain, and definitely with non-combustible temperatures that hover well below boiling. But that wish will be only my second thought. My first, I know, will be nothing but a prayer. And that prayer will be nothing more than simply, thank you. Thank you, God, for sending our roots rain. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our readers and all the people who submitted that we didn't choose that still wrote excellent pieces. And thank you all for being here. Stay safe and remember to leave the warm things you borrowed on your chairs. And I hope to see you in the park this weekend.